Welcome to Conference Talks podcast, hosted by Mike Parker, Steve Peterson, and Gabriella Parker. Join us as we explore and discuss key messages from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints General Conference, inspiring listeners to strengthen their faith in Jesus Christ through heartfelt conversations, personal reflections, and practical applications. In this week's episode, we look at William K. Jackson's talk from the 2025 October conference titled Remembering the Sheep, and we are joined by our special guest, Wade Walters. This was a really beautiful and insightful conversation that touched on finding and reaching out to all members of our community. We talked about what it looks like to keep that connection alive when faith in church is no longer serving individuals, and what we can do to support each other better. We really hope you enjoyed this episode, and please like and follow us on Facebook and Instagram for more content.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Conference Talks, drawing near to Jesus Christ. Our episode this week is focused on Elder William K. Jackson's talk, Remembering the Sheep, from October 2005. And I'll start off and I'll just give a little bit of background on Elder Jackson, a few things that stood out to me, and then I'll introduce our special guest today, Wade Walters. We're so grateful to have Wade with us today. It'll be hard for me not to say bishop because he is our bishop right now. But I'll start off and tell you a little about Elder Jackson. Prior to his call to the General Authority 70, I think it was 2022, Elder Jackson served as an Area 70, and he was also the president of the India New Delhi mission. And we hear a little bit about that in the talk. He was born in the U.S., but because his parents loved volunteer work, he also received schooling in Honduras, Algeria, and Afghanistan as he was growing up. He then served a mission in Bolivia, the La Paz mission, and he's married to Ann Kessler. They are parents of 8 children, 3 of whom are adopted, one from India, one from Nepal, and one from Cambodia. Elder Jackson professionally obtained a doctorate of medicine, and then he worked overseas for 26 years, including 23 years as a regional medical officer in the U.S. Foreign Service. This gave Elder Jackson the opportunity to interact with Latter-day Saints in about 120 countries, particularly in what we would refer to as the developing world and what he called a lot of first-generation church members. He said one of the biggest components of his testimony has been watching the night and day difference in the lives of church members who have found the gospel. He says it's a tangible witness of the power of the gospel of Jesus Christ, the enabling transformative power of the gospel. And I just second that with my testimony as a convert, just the power of that statement. So grateful for Elder Jackson, but also really grateful that we have Wade Walters here with us. Wade is currently serving as a bishop and used to be a seminary and institutes teacher over 10 years. And then he did a career change, and at the age of 38 went back to medical school and got a doctor of medicine and started out in general practice, but has moved on to palliative care as his focus. And I've had some great experience seeing Wade in action there. Wade is married to his wonderful wife, Amber, and they have 7 kids. And I just can share that Wade is a leader with an incredible heart and insights that just bless us all, that know him and have heard from him. I would say, along with Elder Jackson's comment, Wade is someone who I would consider to be a transformational leader. So thanks so much, Wade. And I'll turn it over to you to just say anything else you'd like to share at the start, but also leading you off with a question about what led you to pick this talk for our episode today.
Okay. Thanks, Mike. I just wanted to say how grateful I am to be here. And I was reaching earlier. I thought I should get a Kleenex or something because I'm afraid I might get emotional. I love you guys. I love this group. And I remember when you guys first moved to the Cardston area, being invited to, it was like a man's book club. It was like a group of men that got together and would read and discuss things. And I can't even remember how I ended up being invited, but I've always been grateful for that association. I've just admired the two of you and then Gabriella, your dad, so for years. And so I'm grateful to be with you. And it's humbling to be your bishop. That's a humbling. I chose this talk because I think I've always felt like I wasn't very good at administering. I'm just not a great administrator. And so being called as a bishop has been challenging because of that kind of, I guess, a weakness that I perceive in myself where I'm not that great at running the administrative side of the church. And that makes me feel vulnerable. And when Elder Jackson gave this talk, I was paying attention because of the examples he gave that referenced meetings in the church. And it was actually the second last paragraph in the talk where he talks about a ward council where he attends as a ward missionary and they don't report on their stewardship. I was asked to attend a ward council, and then I said I was surprised when all that was discussed was an upcoming ward activity. And that just, I guess, filled me with a sense of guilt because I've been in those kind of ward councils before. I've held those ward councils before, and I just recognize that isn't the kind of ward council I want to run. So I chose this talk partly because it accorded with me. Okay, yeah. So it was really that paragraph talking about a ward council meeting where he had attended it as a ward mission leader and had expected to have the opportunity to kind of give an accounting of his ministry, and then all they talked about was a ward activity. And that I guess hurt a little bit because I have sat through and presided over ward council meetings where it feels like that happens more frequently than it should, that we talk about programs or activities. And really the example he gave was in Pakistan, where he had been a week earlier. There was a little group of people, they sat around a small table and they talked about people. And each leader reported on their stewardship and the individuals and the families they were concerned about. And so then this talk, I left conference thinking I need to go back to the ward council and share this talk and ensure that we're not wasting our time talking about the wrong things.
Yeah, that's such a good point. One thing that I really liked about this talk as well, and we can get into it more, but I love the juxtaposition that I think he brought up about first generation members versus us in established Western culture church. It felt very different. And I think that's also normal because our lives and our spiritual relationships is so different because of our physical circumstances. And to me, it brought up a little bit of Tim's point. He brought up a couple podcasts ago. He talked about that he has a student from Ghana that Zooms in for Institute and that his faith is so remarkable. And he point blank that the student says it's because we need Jesus so much more. And we have this spiritual need and connection. And because we're so independent here in our society, and I think in our really strong pioneer roots, which has built up a lot of layers of not only trauma, but protecting and being driven from places, like we've really learned to be independent and to hold to our institutions, but also this strong desire of you take care of yourself and your family, and that's the one that you look to. And then maybe looking outward almost just doesn't feel, maybe it feels too scary, maybe it feels like it's not necessary, or maybe we're battling with too much, I don't know, are we going to get rejected, or how is that going to feel? Whereas these first generation members in India, you're starting with nothing. The only place you can go is up. We just have to seek and we have to try, and I think we have to be bold, and they were much bolder than I've ever experienced before.
I appreciated in his talk the very beginning where he talks about Christ as the good shepherd and the pattern. So I was kind of going through the list in the pattern, almost like a little mini checklist. It's like knowing your sheep by name, loving them, finding them, feeding them, leading them back home, and kind of what he expects us to do as his under shepherds. And the one that really struck out to me, and it surprised me after I'm like, wow, feeding. I'm like, feeding is an art, right? Like, I think part of it where my mind went was, are there scope boundaries around feeding, or is that a box that we put feeding in, right? Like, if I want somebody to be attached to Christ and to his church and it's not working, right? Like, do I need to change the feeding formula in a sense?
Yeah.
And what's okay? Like, is any feeding okay? Because that's where people, like, do we meet people where they're at? Like, what do you need? Where are you at? What are you interested in? And then layer on top of that, Or are there scope boundaries? Like, what do you think about that?
That's a good one. I want to just lengthen it a little bit because I know we're talking about like spiritual feeding and teaching, but I think hospitality is a big component of that, and more about just when we invite people to our home, right? And we talk about hospitality and hospitality at church. Part of that can be, having a specific purpose and coming together. And often when we have activities, there's food. But so much of that is the tone and the vibe and the energy that we're bringing. I think whatever our message is trying to be, we really need to figure out about what is the feeling behind it? What is the thing that we're actually trying to persuade people? Because I think the minute you step into someone's home or step into the church doors, it's the feeling that hits you. And that can be a good or a bad feeling. That can be a feeling of, I'm uncomfortable. This doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel welcoming. I don't want to go and sit in the pew. I can only feel comfortable in the hall here, or I'll have a little side conversation. Or you immediately just felt embraced and you felt drawn in and you felt like brought in. And there was that story where, was it a couple that immediately came to a ward and they were called as the Relief Society president and young men's, and they're like, you're here, we are going to use you right here and now. And maybe if we grab people with more enthusiasm, not trying to scare them away, but really bring them in instead of wait for them to crawl into the church or whatever it is.
That's a good point. Elder Jackson spent so much time in kind of remote areas of the church. That example of the couple moving in and they both get callings right away. I contrast that with our ward where couples move in and we don't have callings to, like, we're thinking of how do we find callings for them and who do we release so that we can create a calling. I think this talk, it's good because it teaches principles that can be applied in, or that we have to figure out how to apply in those smaller areas, but also then how do we adapt these principles to where the church is well established? Large words versus tiny branches. And there's challenges and blessings to both of those scenarios that are unique.
Wade, when Elder Jackson's talk, when he talked about the under shepherd and listed the qualities, were there any qualities that really stood out to you about us as under shepherds that can really help us be most effective in that role?
Well, so if I go to one of the early paragraphs, he uses Moroni chapter 6 as kind of this example. He said Moroni teaches this well. He lived in a time when they didn't have ways to contact people. They didn't have the benefits of technology, but they kept track of the sheep. And then he asked the question, how is this done? And he said the members were numbered among the people of the Church of Christ, and their names were taken, that they might be remembered and nourished by the good word of God. Well, even as I always knew as a seminary teacher that there was some kind of power in knowing people's names. If you could be good at remembering people's names, it wasn't in a manipulative way, but there was an advantage to that if I could remember students' names, they felt that was important. And to this day, if I see seminary students that I taught 20 years ago and I can call them by name, they respond. It's almost universally they say, I can't believe you remember me. And I go, well, of course I remember you. And I think that it's just it's a way to demonstrate interest. And so that's one of the key things. I think there is something to that. And then I feel sympathy towards people who struggle with that, because other people will say, well, I just have always struggled with remembering names. That doesn't come naturally. So I want to be sensitive to that too. I'm not trying to indict people who aren't good with names, but that's a challenge. If you can't remember names, then you've got to figure out another way to let people know that you care about them.
That's why we all have our names on the screen here, so we don't forget. We had an interesting conversation today after church, because this remembering people's names, and we're talking about renewing our covenants, right? And part of that is being known by Jesus, in a sense, right? Like, it's a personal experience to renew your covenant and to follow Jesus. But it was an interesting conversation, because the insight that came, I've often thought of renewing my covenant is like, I need to renew it because I broke it. Like, I need to start fresh, right? Like, that's true. But there's a whole nother way to think about renewing the covenant. When I watch my wife during sacrament meeting, she's writing notes, right? And usually it's a list. Here's who I need to talk to. Here's what I need to do, that kind of stuff. And it struck me today, I've only been married, 27 years, and I'm slow, right? Admittedly, right? It just took a while to sink in, but I'm like, that is renewing the covenant, because in a sense, she's saying, I want to live the covenant this week. Guide me, teach me, give me intelligence, give me inspiration as to what I can do. And very different from I broke it and I need to try again, to help me do it and inspire my effort, magnify it, help it land, right? And to me, that was an important insight that connects to this idea from Moroni, like how they counseled over the welfare of people's souls, right? Like that was I love that focus for everything they did. Like if they're playing whatever they played instead of basketball back then, maybe basketball existed back then, I don't know. It's historical artifacts, but even that, there were like, can we play basketball in a way where we're concerned for the welfare of the souls of who we're playing with, right? That they come and they're known, they're known by name, they feel belonging, they feel included, right? They feel connected, not just to us, but to Christ, right? This is just a small little vehicle. One of the themes I see in there is how do we help people feel that connection and that belonging with Christ, and then with us as the church doing our best to follow in the pattern and in the covenants and everything that's set out for us.
And I'll just add, there was a talk a few years back in conference, and the speaker, Elder Schmidt, I think it was, he said, the sweetest sound to any person is their name. And just love the insights you both had around that, and just how do we connect? How do we help people feel loved? More and more, I'm just feeling like my job is to love, And if my love is focused on that other person, then how can they best receive that love? Part of that is really knowing them, including their name.
I think, too, one of the simplest things, but also the most impactful, is praying over people. And we can do that as individuals, but also as group and wards. And I think it sets a precedent when we are in ward council or in Relief Society meetings and we're calling out people's names in prayer. And whether or not those people are in the room or they're not there, it means something. Just like we talked about, being called by your name means something. The promise that Christ and God knows us and will call us by our name is very important to us. And the way that he talks to each of us, but also to his prophets, is through the use of that. And it's a simple, but it's a powerful thing. And we can be all over the place in terms of how earnestly maybe we're praying for people, but it still matters. And I think that when it comes down to true tragedy and when only the power is in God's hand, all that we have is prayer. All that we're trying to pray for when we're hoping that person will heal or make it through, or whatever it is that we're hoping for the miracle, the only thing that we can lean on is prayer. And so I think as we exercise it more and as we get more comfortable praying for people and being earnest about it, the more power that we're exercising for them and the benefits for us as well. And our relationship will grow. I think we'll hear God better, and we'll also be able to receive the Spirit and direction after. Because typically after you pray sometimes and you take a moment to listen, there's a lesson or there's an action step to go. And it may feel like your own thought or your own idea there, but there's a one step forward in the midst of where I need to go on this path to work with this person.
So good. Another question I'll put out there to us is, in a part of his talk, Elder Jackson says, Christ has organized his church in such a way that it should be difficult to forget a soul, for each is dear to him. And I'd just like to kind of put that out there about, what stands out to you about the way the church is organized that can help us to be positioned to never forget a soul. And feel free to offer different perspectives on that as well.
Well, I was thinking, the churches, we've said recently and in the recent years that it's a family-centered church, church supporting the family. So I think of my own stewardship in my family. I got home from church today and I was doing tithing settlement and I'm trying to minister to members of the ward. And then I come home and I think, well, I have my own little flock of 7 kids. And to be honest, I'm not doing so great with a couple of them individually. like the relationship isn't well, it's not as good as I would like it to be. And so as much as we're these individual family units, we're individuals first, we're family units, but then there's this larger church organization. And I have seen how the church organization has compensated for some of my failures in my own home, which kind of reminds me, like, no other success can compensate for failure in the home. Well, the truth is that the church is organized in a way that it is trying to compensate for failure in the home. Sometimes my relationship with a son is strained, but he has a young men's leader who is able to connect with him, and maybe can connect with him better because he isn't his father. And I think we probably could all relate to that in our own lives. Members of the church who played a pivotal role precisely because they weren't, our brother or sister or mom or dad.
It's a really good point, because I think we're struggling right now with the church and with changes of feeling this need. Like, in some ways, I really love that we've dialed back on the have tos and the activities, but at the same time, there are pain points and there are struggles with that. There's also struggles, especially after COVID was just a marker for it. The pandemic really reclused all of us in a way, or made us really tight into our family bonds. But I think all of us are struggling so much with connection, and we're starving ourselves of being able to connect with people, to have healthy relationships. And because maybe we don't have good outside community relationships, our family relationships are struggling because there's no buffer, there's no outlet, there's no whatever for it. Or maybe it's just a toxic situation and we don't have anywhere to go. I know that I am constantly starving for interactions with people, and that's kind of why I wanted to do a podcast or do other things, is talk. I like to connect, but I don't feel like I have enough opportunities or places or friendships where I can just go and do that. And I don't think I'm alone in that aspect. I think that's a common theme for many people. And even if you are married with kids, you can be lonely. If you're a child among 10 siblings, you can be very lonely if you're one person. There's this balancing act that the church is still, I think, trying to figure out, because the dialing away of needing to go to people's house and visit teach versus ministering could be a text on the phone. There's a consequence for that if you're not the person that's proactive around it. The need to feel to go to so many activities, or maybe dial backing on pageants or spiritual experiences for the youth, there's a consequence for that. And especially, I think we're coming more and more to odds in there. Our single community is growing more than our family community is. And I talk about it too much and I don't want to be weird about it, but it's a hard point when the church feels like it no longer represents you, it no longer serves you, or maybe doesn't want you if you don't look a certain way or are part of a certain group. So this desire to belong, that's the underlying message that I feel with this talk. It's less about the accounting and bringing people back to the true gospel. I want people to love and join the church for sure, but I want people more to feel loved and to feel a part of community than anything else, and to remember that relationship.
It's interesting, Gabriella. How would you feel if you were one of the individuals we talked about at ward council?
I assume I am, but
no, but you're probably not. But what I'm hearing right now, because I know I'm on a podcast, but I'm also, like, as I hear you express that, I go, this is precisely the kind of thing that should be brought up at a ward council. Where I would come back and I would say, hey, I was visiting with Gabriella and she's sharing her experiences as a single member in the church and just expressing how that doesn't always feel like there's a place. How do we minister to her? How do we approach this as a ward council? I'd love to hear the Relief Society president's views on that, the primary president, my counselors. That's an example of how the church organization, this counseling together, you're expressing some individual, I guess, concerns as an individual, but man, I should be taking those examples back so that we can use the organization of the church to meet the needs of the sheep.
Yeah, I do think that it does start with changing our discussions. If we're talking about just ward council in general, that would be a big impact. And maybe that means inviting more voices and more diverse opinions. Maybe we don't have a different enough pool of thought. Maybe we don't have people that can represent the marginalized or whatever. And I don't want to make everything super, feeling political or victimized or anything like that. I don't think that's what it is. But I think even in a ward of similar like-minded people that live in a small radius, there's a big diversity in there, and there's different experiences and feelings and things that maybe honestly have not been talked about at all, that we just aren't aware of because they're so private, they're so personal, or they're so painful. So I think if we can expand that on council, but there's a tricky juxtaposition in there too, where we don't want to get too gossipy. And that sometimes has been the case, and people have been hurt. I know there have been instances where really private and personal things have been shared and not kept confidential in a way where it's gotten back around. And that betrayal, well, yeah, I would never want to step foot in the door again if I felt betrayed like that, or didn't know how I was being discussed. How was my name being used? What was the intention behind it? And who knew it? So it's tricky.
Yeah.
Just kind of adding to that, Mike, the paragraph you read talks about safety nets, right? So Wade, in your experience, what makes a good safety net? Or maybe the companion question, what is an ideal safety net? Right? Because part of this talk is the ideal. Like Christ has designed a church so that nobody can be forgotten. There's an ideal. So what makes a good safety net? What makes an ideal safety net, perhaps?
Well, depends. What makes a safety net look good and what actually catches people. Because I think sometimes we're building, like making these fancy nets. If they don't catch people, then it doesn't matter what they look like, or, and we brought this up, we talked a little bit before we even started filming. We have these safety nets, so people in place that are mindful of the sheep. So, mentors or advisors or ministering brothers or sisters. But if the sheep can still leave the fold, then it wasn't a great safety net. And I'm open about that. I have members in my priest quorum who are not active in the church, and I know who they are and I know where they live, and I feel like I'm not helping them. And so then I go, that's weird. The net was in place. They have a ministering brother. They have a young men's advisor. They have a bishop who knows their name. I know where they live. I know their life circumstances, and yet they're still not here. So I want to know, what is a good safety net? I guess it's maybe doing something about that. I know they're lost, but what am I doing to go not bring them back, not drag them back, but invite them back? Yeah, what does a good safety net look like?
I think from what's been shared, part of what makes a good safety net is it looks different for different people. Maybe the net itself is the same brand, but there's different models. We've got people that we're able to mobilize that can figure out what that net needs to look at. It is tricky, right? Because we believe in the principle of agency, and, part of the journey of some of us as sheep may be to wander away for a while, right? I think for me, I've been an elders quorum president a couple of times, and I should probably want a third shot at it, because I'm not sure I had my heart where it needed to be always, which was, where are they at? What can I do to help them feel known and loved? Less about, I need to get them sitting in my elders quorum lesson, right? Which might be part of what was driving them away, but more about, how can I really be a better under shepherd for my Savior and lead people to Him, rather than to my program, right?
And what you were saying there with wandering away, there have been so many times where I have stormed out of things in anger, but like secretly hoped that someone would follow after me. Or maybe I come in from a bad day and I'm being kind of grumpy, and I sort of want someone to say, hey, what's wrong? I don't really want to bring it up, but I would love if someone actually sought after me. And I think sometimes that's my relationship with God. Actually, often it is. I really just want Him to seek me out before I seek Him first, but I need to humble myself to that. But I think we sometimes miss the opportunity because of fear, or because of maybe we build up the whole story of, well, I'm going to go reach out to them and they're going to spit in my face and tell me to get away. Instead of maybe, just maybe, and maybe they would do it, but maybe they still want it. Maybe they still need it. And I think about so many conversion stories where they had a first contact with the missionary and they bit off their head, and then they felt bad about it. And years later, they had an opportunity to do it again, and they wanted to invite that in. There's so many preparatory things. So maybe your safety net, or maybe you reaching out after the one, if it goes badly, that's still a good thing. And that's still probably a very helpful thing along their journey, and to have more touch points and to keep coming back. And maybe that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to keep doing it. Like, don't keep hurting yourself or being in the way of people berating you, but maybe step a little bit into the unknown, risk a little bit, see where it leads us, see if there's any softening that can be done, or if someone has already softened it for you and you're the perfect person to then see where their heart is.
Yeah.
As I'm listening, I recall a talk somebody gave about sheep. And they were like, sheep are actually, and I'm a sheep, right? Like, this is me. Like, we're actually fairly simple creatures. Sheep follow grass, right? Like, we're looking for nourishment, and back to that idea of feeding. So if I wander, it's because I'm following food, or what is perceived as food, right? What is perceived as something that I need. And if I'm wandering from something, it's because I don't think I need it anymore, or I don't see the relevance, right? Or the grass is greener on the other path. Right? To hate to bring up a cliche, but sometimes that's the perception, right? And it's interesting. My background's in public health, and as a field, we're famous for building things that nobody wants and then wondering why they don't come. For example, let's create a stop smoking program because there's lots of people smoking in this community. Oh, why didn't anybody show up? Well, what do? Let's talk more about it. Let's raise the volume. Like, it's a volume issue. Not enough people heard about it. Oh, they're still not coming. So sometimes for us, it's really the humility of, what do people want and how do we meet them there, build their relationship, and then help shape a future that there's a perceived value in.
Yeah. That's really good. I mean, that idea of wandering off to a greener pasture, to me, it's this delicate balance of, if you spend all your energy going after these lost sheep and then bring them back to a pasture that's been neglected, like, you do need to feed them. And so you have to ensure that the programs of the church are nourishing, that the talks that are given in sacrament are nourishing, not offensive. So attention has to be given to make sure that, and actually even that's wrong, Jesus Christ is the nourishment. So what it is you have to ensure that in your congregation, there is a focus on Jesus Christ and his true gospel, which saves people. And so now you've got to make sure that when you get those sheep back to church, they don't just get there and go, why am I here again? Like, it's the same old brown grass. Like, I'm out of here again. And I worry about that. Sometimes I honestly think, are we ready to invite people back? Or do we need to green up the grass before we risk inviting them back? Because I'd hate for them to come back and go, it's more of what I left. I'm not finding the nourishment. So I guess it makes me conscious of ensuring that a relationship with Jesus Christ is the focus. And maybe that's the good example of shepherding, is that they will want to come back because they feel that relationship with us and with Jesus Christ before they get it back into the church walls. It's that the relationship with Jesus is what's bringing them back, I hope.
I really like that, Wade. It makes me think, I'm pretty comfortable saying there isn't a part of my life, past, present, or future, that Jesus isn't interested in. And that those can be important things. They can also be less important things. Maybe they're all important to Jesus. I don't know, right? Like, I have a goal to play the bagpipes. Is that important to Jesus?
Probably,
right?
I love the bagpipes.
My family doesn't, which is why I haven't done that yet. I'm still working on the neighbors. But when I look at it that way, it's like, Jesus, there isn't a part of me that Jesus wouldn't love and find interesting. So if I'm trying to build a relationship with Jesus, somewhere there's a connection that's going to work, right? And I felt a little reproof this week. I'm like, I need to involve Jesus more in my economic providing efforts, right? I kind of built a bit of a compartment there. Steve, go work hard. And then checking with Jesus around other things and at church and et cetera, right?
Yeah.
So I built a silo unintentionally. Right? So it's like, so if Jesus should be in all aspects of my life, and actually I believe he is more than I'm aware, right? It's more probably an awareness thing than a presence thing. Connecting myself as a sheep, connecting others as a sheep. Is it wrong to say the feedlot's wide open, like anything's fair game? Because in the simplest things, Christ can be found and that connection can be found?
Yeah. I was reading in Doctrine and Covenants 138 this week, and two things stood out to me that I think relates back to what we're talking about. One was that the righteous were waiting for Jesus to come and redeem them. And that really struck me. That's one thing we all have in common. We all need Jesus at any time. I would have thought, or I think I would have thought at the end of my life that, like, okay, that's a pass, but they were waiting for Jesus. And then the people that went to those that had not accepted or embraced Jesus, it was his under shepherds going there with his power, with his authority to bring people to him, And so I think, as you both said there, that we're all in the same net there. We all need Jesus, and we can all help bring each other to Jesus.
Well, I'm a little confused. I love that I'm confused. This is you're a great group to figure this out with. So, Mike, you kind of touched on this earlier, right? Like there's a principle and there's application of the safety net kind of idea, right? So is there, for example, when Wade, you touched on this, like priest quorum, is there a safety net for priest quorum, but it looks different for each of the 10 members? I don't know how many members, so I'm just picking a number, right? Or is there one safety net that all 10 need, or is it both? And does that apply kind of universally, right? Like are the safety nets principle based, but then we find ourselves in them, or can we each have individualized safety nets that we and others create, or others create if we don't or can't ourselves, right? Like there's a balance. I'm trying to understand personalized safety nets versus principle based safety nets that are more general, I guess. So to make up a scenario, like let's say, Mike, you were anti-Mormon, but I knew you loved the Vancouver Canucks, right? And like, okay, I'm going to talk to Mike. We're going to go watch hockey and hang out. You know what I mean? Like there's a whole path there of me and you connecting. Going back to the idea, does Jesus love the fact that you love the Canucks? Somewhere in there, it matters, right? Because it's something that you love. So somewhere in any connection, Jesus can magnify it and turn that rock into light, kind of using the brother of Jared type analogy, right? But again, does it need to get that individual, or is the general safety net okay? It wasn't a very well articulated question, but I was trying to get to individual versus general safety nets.
Yeah.
Like, so I think it's a mix of them. Like, I think there's safety nets specific to me, but there's also like elders quorum and ward and church-wide safety nets. And kind of the thing Elder Jackson points to is there's a combination of safety nets for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
But is it okay to, and Mike, sorry to put you on the spot, but like using that you as an example, if you left the church but you love hockey, is that the safety net we go to where we can build a relationship there? Yeah, like he might come to church, probably isn't going to go over very well, but like, Mike, let's go to a game, let's watch a game, and trust that in that space somewhere, God can create opportunities for other conversations and insights and things. It's kind of like the people want to know you care before they want to know what you know, like same kind of idea.
As you asked the question, Steve, the visual that kind of came to my mind was it's the people that are holding the net, right? The net might be the same, but the people that are holding that net. I was thinking about, those old cartoons about people jumping out of buildings that are on fire or whatever. And, they've got that net and, the people that are holding it. So anyways, that's what kind of came to mind, right? So Mike leaves the church and Steve knows Mike loves hockey, Mike loves the Canucks, right? That's part of the net that Steve's going to hang on to there, whether it's formal ministering or informal ministering, right?
And I think it goes back to your earlier point, Steve, about Christ being involved in everything, that he can't be compartmentalized, even though maybe we try and put him into compartments and put our spiritual life into one section, that, he can be involved in the hockey relationship and in your connection between both of you with that. He can be involved in the financial gain. Like there's a blessing and there's an understanding. And so the benefit can be that I feel like as long as there's some sort of human connection and relationship first, that when someone falls astray or they're their faith isn't where they need to be, or church is not serving them, that's okay. We've got the relationship to work with, and Christ is going to work with that relationship, and he's going to continue to insert himself and to insert things that will bless and call to our minds his importance and his need. So I think that's where we trust and have a little bit more faith in the mysterious ways that God works, and that we continue to try and do things and be less concerned of the linear path. Because this talks a lot about things in a way that almost sounds like we need to find that perfect method or that magic system. And we said earlier, there really isn't one, and each person is individual. And each story is going to be weird, wacky, and wonderful in its own way.
One thing that jumps out to me too is that this is complex. I love what you just said, honey, about there is no perfect program. There is no one size fits all, right? There's a lot of complexity involved with the individual, with the ward. So,
and I love what Wade, you said about really nurturing that pasture, because I do think that is such a key point. And I feel like maybe we could have totally focused on that first, because as much as we like to chase after people and hook in the loose ends and tie it all up, sometimes it's the mote and the beam in our own eye when we're not looking at, okay, well, what's the program like? What's the meat of it? Is it actually serving people, and is it truly being a light unto the world? Because another way of drawing people back is by shining brighter. So we can be less focused on searching after them, but holding up the lantern, right? If we do believe in agency and we believe that we're smarter than sheep, which we are, because apparently sheep are really, really dumb. And that's why there's an analogy for it there. We are still seeking, and we're trying to find truth. So if we can make things hospitable, if we can focus on our own testimony, our own issues, tightening up our ways of interacting with people. Do we need to work more on judgment? Do we need to work more on loving each other in just an open-ended way? Then that light's going to expand, and that will bring people back.
Well, maybe too, another thing to keep in mind is that this idea of remembering the sheep is just one analogy, and you can't see the whole gospel through just this lens. In the chapter where this idea of the lost sheep is shared, they also talk about a lost coin. Yeah. Like a coin is lost. It's an inanimate object. It's lost due to neglect or accident. A sheep wanders off. But then in that same chapter, there's also the prodigal son. And that's someone who by choice says, give me the inheritance. I'm out of here. Like, I don't want to go to church. And the father's approach there is different. He honors the agency. He lets the prodigal son leave. And then he is not going out to find him. He's waiting until he comes back. And so sometimes I can think of members in our ward where I think I need to be the loving father who's just waiting for them to return. And when they do, I throw a cloak around them and give them the ring, rejoice. There might be those scenarios. And then there might be a lost coin where it's like, no, there's someone who actually just got neglected. Like someone just forgot that they were a member. Let's go find them. So there's some limitations, and I like just choosing this lens to look through, but it's one way to approach ministering in God's kingdom.
So good. Any final thoughts or questions that we want to take the opportunity to go through?
I think a final thought and question would be, what can we do now, and what can we do each individually? And I mean that more as an open-ended question than giving an answer on what it is that we need to do. But I think if we really do dedicate some time and some thought and some prayer to what relationships that we know of right now that need healing and help, and what people we might have an influence over or an opportunity to love, and what might that look like? And then also making space in there for God to direct us with it. Because I can come up with my own ideas and thoughts and solutions for things, but then that can be very different if I go to the Lord in prayer and I ask thoughtfully, what would you like me to do here? Or how can I be an instrument? And that thing might be a little bit more scary. Maybe he's asking me to do something I really don't want to do. But if I have a faith and a willingness and an openness to do that thing, I think that's when the wonderful, mysterious, crazy work happens, is when we follow that.
One thing that came to my mind was just the Lord works on an individual basis. That really, Elder Jackson references Moroni living in a very difficult time. Well, there's like one member left. It's him. He's watched his whole society be destroyed. But whether it's 6 members of the church in Joseph Smith's little cabin, or it's millions of members, really it's individuals. Like, you can think of big programs, but it's always on an individual basis that the Lord is saving his people. It's always one at a time. They feel the marks in his hands and feet one at a time. The Nephites come up one by one. We pass through the veil in the temple into the celestial room one person at a time. There never is like, okay, everybody up, everybody in. It's just, it's a real individual thing. So maybe at the end of the day, what Elder Jackson is teaching us, it's that this is the type of work that is always done on an individual basis. And that's what allows it to be so personal and intimate. It should fit each individual, no matter how different they are. This is an individual work. So if Steve likes bagpipes and he's the only one, it still should work for him. Or if Gabriella's not married, then it should work for you. It should work for me individually, not my family. Jesus doesn't save my family. He saves each member of my family, like one by one. So whatever we're doing in the church, it should always be back to, what do I know about the one? And because I'm only one person, and so I can only minister to one person at a time. I speak to a whole crowd at once.
It brings to mind, by small and simple things are great things brought to pass. And I think sometimes, and particularly, my heart goes out to you and other bishops out there, that there's a burden there. But I think part of what Elder Jackson is doing is saying that our safety nets are people, right? And we were talking about how the nets might look the same, but the people that are holding those nets to catch those people, they may be different. But I think it goes back to what you said, that we focused on the one, like that stake president. The new elders quorum president came in there and said, we're going to have great lessons. We're going to have great activities. And the president's like, well, is there one person who you could bring to the temple?
Yeah.
And, so I think we all have that opportunity to take Gabriella's invitation and think about that and not worry about everybody and everything, but who does Christ want us to focus on? How can we best be his under shepherds, including taking care of ourselves too, and loving ourselves so that we can be in a good position to be that light to Christ for others. I just want to say I'm just so grateful. We've had the privilege of hearing from you frequently as our bishop and watching your example. You are a people first leader, and you lead us all to those 2 great commandments. And so it's just such a privilege to talk with you today and to watch you in action.
Thank you. No, thank you. It's been fun to be here. Fun's the wrong word. It's been edifying, and I think I'll actually leave here with some pondering about how to go about this work in a more personalized.
Last thought that I do want to put out there, and you talked a little bit about it earlier, and that we struggle a little bit here specifically in our ward, is being able to give enough callings and purpose to people. But I think one thing truly that can be helpful, especially maybe if we see someone that's kind of edging toward the door, that's kind of got their foot out there. I know for me, I have said this in the past to people, and I continue to do this. If you want me to be active, call me to something, because if I'm not doing something, I don't really have a real reason to come to church. And I think part of shepherding, and what you said earlier, Wade, about Christ is also the shepherd, but he's also the lamb. We're here to help people and also be fed and nourished and be helped, right? And so there is so much goodness that can happen when we're involved in salvation. So maybe instead of trying to make people, or maybe instead of going after people and them feeling like they're being the project or they're the lost lamb. Invite them to help other people. Invite them to help other lost people and to be a saving force. And I think missionaries do a great job inviting members to discussions. And maybe those members can be people that maybe aren't your, missionary standard member, but they offer insight. They offer relationship. They offer side-by-side questions and doubts to things. And so I think when we invite people and we trust in people's agency and their ability to be saved and to understand things for themselves, that's the growing. So don't put all the ownership on you. Delegate, have other people come to the meetings and do things, and involve other people, and trust that God works in all of us and he can do a work beyond what we can do.
Yeah. Well, maybe, and I know you're going to have to shut this off eventually and you could edit it down,
Okay.
but wouldn't it be way better, like, to think of a ward council as this group of 10 people? Like, really, that's your ward council? Mm-hmm. The ward council would be any members in your ward who are implementing this pattern of, like, where 2 or 3 people are gathered in my name and they say, who's an individual in our ward who's struggling, needs help or assistance or brotherhood? If we could get the ward to counsel that way in little pockets everywhere, that would be that's the way Jesus wants us to do it, is not 9 people or 10 people in a bishop's office. It's, would you all get together as a ward and counsel in this way where you remember names, think of individuals, learn how to feed them, invite them back, and then it says ultimately lead them home again, bring them back to Jesus. And so that idea of delegated, it's like, yeah, every member in this ward should be implementing this pattern in whatever size council they have access to.
Mm-hmm. And simplify the process, right? I think sometimes we focus on too much grandeur, and that's a lot of pressure, because truly only 3 or 4 people pull it off, and it's usually the Relief Society, because they are the beasts of burden for most wards of many things. And it doesn't have to be big events, it doesn't have to be dinners, it doesn't have to be 1,000 activities or 1,000 donuts. We're all dying of sugar. Let's stop, let's take a fast. But just the simple things, and remembering that the connection is enough. One last thing about it is that I was listening to something where someone said that entertaining is different than hospitality. When we think about entertaining, there's a beautiful spread, the house is clean, there's candles, there's music. Hospitality, you can come to someone's dirty living room. It's about connection. It's about being there. It's being present and knowing that there's no shame, there's no pretense. I'm just here for you, and you're welcome here in my abode. And that doesn't necessarily mean that I have to change it for you. And I think that's a principle that we can use in our interactions. Okay, we should end it, but this was an amazing conversation. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on Conference Talks. We hope today's discussion has inspired you to live the message of the gospel a little more each day. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with a friend. Until next time, let's keep learning, living, and becoming true disciples of Jesus Christ.